Snow fell in slow, heavy flakes over the rim of the high mountains, the kind that didn't just drift down, but seemed to settle with weight, as if the sky itself was lowering. The light was the dim grey of a winter afternoon that was already giving up on the day. Sonny was halfway along the pine trail that wound between two ridges when he heard it, a muffled sound, faint, nearly lost in the hiss of wind through the trees. He reined in, tilting his head. It came again, weak but distinct. A cry. For a second he thought it might be a calf caught in a drift. But there was no cattle this high in January. The sound carried something no animal voice ever could, the human edge of fear. He sat there for a moment, letting the cold bite at his face, listening hard. In the high country, strange noises could mean nothing, or they could mean a kind of trouble you didn't want any part of. The smart thing would be to push on toward his cabin before the weather closed in. But there was something about that cry that stuck in him. Not pity, not fear, something sharper. Recognition maybe, though he couldn't have said of what. He swung down from his horse, boots breaking the crust of snow. His coat was heavy with frost at the seams, fur-lined collar crusted with ice. The long rifle across his arm was a solid, familiar weight. He moved toward the sound, snow whispering underfoot, until he saw the shadow at the base of a spruce. It was a girl, 16 at most, heavy in the face and shoulders, but shaking hard enough that her teeth chattered. Her wrists were bound tight, rope cutting cruel into skin already raw and bleeding. Her hair, dark, tangled and frozen in clumps, stuck out from beneath a torn shawl. A strip of cloth gagged her mouth, stiff with ice. Her eyes flew open when she saw him, wide and wild, whites showing all around. She tried to push herself farther back against the tree, but the rope held her fast. Sonny crouched, snow collecting on the brim of his hat. "Easy now," he said, slow and steady, the way you'd talk to a skittish mare. He cut the gag first. Her lips were cracked, skin white where the frozen cloth had pressed. Then he sawed through the ropes at her wrists. The moment she was free, she pulled her hands close to her chest, blowing on them, not looking at him. She didn't thank him, didn't speak, just sat gulping cold air, studying him with the guarded, measuring stare of someone who'd learned the hard way not to trust the first outstretched hand. That was when the wind shifted, carrying a new sound up the valley, the rhythmic crunch of horses in deep snow, 2, maybe 3, close. Sonny looked toward the sound, then back to her. "You're coming with me," he said, not making it a question. He pulled her to her feet, half guiding, half dragging her to his horse. She climbed awkwardly, weight shifting the animal, but he swung up behind her in one practiced motion and turned for the narrow pass. They were gone into the timber just as riders broke over the far ridge. The world on the other side fell away into valleys shadowed by pines, the air sharp with the scent of resin and snow. The girl's breath came in shallow bursts, and Sonny could feel the tremor running through her shoulders. He didn't speak. Words could wait. By the time they reached the cabin, a squat, split-log structure tucked against the slope, night had fallen. The wind was easing, and the snow under the horses' hooves gave off a faint squeak in the deep cold. Inside, the stove's heat hit them like a wall, filling the single room with a red-orange glow. She stood in the middle, dripping meltwater onto the floorboards, her eyes on the far wall, not on him. He set a tin cup of coffee on the table. "What's your name?" She hesitated long enough that he thought she might stay silent. Then she said, "Doesn't matter. Ain't mine no more." Her voice was rough-edged, low, like it had been sanded down. Sonny studied her a moment, then let it go. Shelter first, names later. That night, while the wind tore along the roof and the rafters creaked under the weight of snow, Sonny lay awake on the cot near the door. Across the room she slept near the stove, turned away from him. Somewhere in the dark, the sound of hoofbeats still echoed in his head. Whoever had tied her to that tree wasn't done with her. By the third day, word from the pass had made its way into town, and from town it reached him. Amos Rudd showed up with a fresh whetstone for Sonny's traps and his usual handful of gossip. You hear about Caleb Varner's girl, Amos said, stamping snow from his boots. Not really his girl. Some say he sold her. Punishment for shaming the family. Big one, hard to miss. Wouldn't last 2 nights in the timber. Sonny kept his head bent over the rifle he was oiling. They say some mountain man might have picked her up, Amos went on. Foolish if you ask me. Caleb don't take kindly to losing property. The word property made something tighten in Sonny's jaw, but his face stayed blank. Amos left by midday, never realizing the girl in question was sitting by the stove, mending her torn shawl. Her name, Sonny had learned, was Mary Beth. She spoke little, and when she did, it was clipped, like each word cost more than she had to spare. She spent mornings mending, afternoons staring out the narrow window into the pines. One evening, as beans simmered on the stove, he asked, "You got family somewhere else? Had brothers? They don't talk to me no more." "Why's that?" "'Cause I look like I do. 'Cause I ain't quick enough for Pa. Says a girl my size has got one use, and if I can't do that right, I'm just eating his bread for nothing." Heat rose in Sonny's chest, the old kind that came from being written off before you'd been given a chance. "Town says you're Caleb Varner's," he said. Her mouth twisted. "Town says a lot. But it's true. He sold me to a man up by the ridge. Guess I didn't suit him either. So he tied me up and left me for the wolves." The quiet after that was as heavy as snow on a pine bough. Around noon the next day, hoofbeats came slow and deliberate up the trail. 3 riders stopped outside. The man in the middle, broad-shouldered, beard white with frost, stepped inside without knocking. "Evening, Sonny," he said. "We're looking for something of ours." "Ain't seen nothing of yours," Sonny said, his rifle leaning where he could reach it. Caleb's gaze flicked to Mary Beth, then back. "Might want to think on that. Be a shame if we had to come back after dark." They left without another word. Mary Beth let out a long breath. "They ain't going to let this go." "No," Sonny said, "they ain't." And he knew he'd crossed a line he couldn't step back over. 2 nights later, the mountains went still. Not the stillness of falling snow, but the kind that meant something was moving out there. Sonny had felt it before. He was mending a boot by lamplight when the first faint thump, thump came, steady and measured. Mary Beth stirred. "Is it them?" "Don't matter who. Matters they're waiting." For 3 days the signs were there. Hoofprints half filled with snow, branches broken where someone had leaned to watch the slope, fire pits still warm. They were patient. On the 4th day, Amos came again, eyes shifting toward the tree line. "Word is Caleb's called in markers. Men who owe him. Ain't no law'll stand in his way." Mary Beth stepped into the doorway. "I'm not going back." "It don't work like that, miss," Amos said gently. "I said I'm not going back." Her voice was sharp, but her eyes were wet. That night, Sonny sat with his rifle in pieces, oiling each part. "They'll come soon. When they do, they won't be here to talk. I'm not scared of them anymore." "You should be. Fear's what keeps you alive." The next afternoon, a thin column of smoke rose on the far slope, then another, then another. Signal fires. By sundown, more riders gathered at the tree line, not 3 this time, but a dozen or more. Inside, the cabin felt like a box closing in. They came at night, not dawn, not with warning. Sonny woke to the crunch of boots in snow. Moonlight spilled across the clearing, silver and cold, catching the movement of men, 3 from the front, 2 circling behind. Mary Beth was already awake, sitting up. He handed her an iron pipe. "If one gets inside, swing till they're down." The first knock was a slam against the door. "Sonny," a voice called, "send her out, and we ride away." Silence. "You got till I count 3. 1, 2. "There's no 3, Sonny said evenly. "You come through this door, you best not miss." The frame shuddered under a boot. Sonny fired through the gap, A man cursed and fell back. The fight came slow, crawling through the night. Rifles cracked, boots pounded snow. Mary Beth's breath came fast, her grip tight on the pipe. A shadow rose at the back window. She swung hard. Iron met bone with a sound that turned the stomach. The man vanished from sight. When it was over, hoofprints led away into the timber. The snow was still again. "They'll be back," Sonny said. "Then we don't run," Mary Beth answered, voice steady. Morning brought a cold, glittering peace. By afternoon, 6 men appeared at the far edge of the clearing, Caleb in the middle. "Girl," he called, "time to come back." "I'm not yours," she said. "You're what I say you are." She stepped forward. "You sold me like I was worth less than a mule. Then you let a man leave me to freeze. If that's family, I'll take my chances here." Caleb's jaw worked. "The law says." "Then maybe it's time somebody said no to your law." For a long moment no one moved. Then Caleb spat into the snow and turned away. Mary Beth stood watching them go, breath fogging in the cold. "Maybe I'm a target now,"
she said, "but I'm not hiding anymore. Not the kind a neighbor might give. Not the kind of rhythm that said friend." The sound went through the wood and into his bones. Sonny's hand froze an inch from the latch. Another knock, 3 heavy beats, then silence, not impatient, just deliberate. Whoever it was, they weren't cold enough yet to hurry, or they didn't expect to be told no. Mary Beth looked up from where
she sat by the stove, a spoon hanging motionless in mid-air, the steam from the stew curling past her cheek. Her eyes searched his face for an answer he didn't have. The wind rattled the window just then, but it didn't cover the faint crunch of boots in snow. Whoever was out there had shifted their weight. Just 1 step, maybe 2. Testing the boards. Getting closer to the door. Sonny felt his pulse in his fingertips. "That ain't—" she started, then cut herself off, her mouth closed in a tight line. He gave a small shake of his head. No sense in finishing the thought. No sense in naming them before they chose to name themselves. The third knock came harder. It made the lantern by the door tremble on its hook. Sonny didn't think they were trying to break in. Not yet. No, this was a game, a reminder. Whoever it was wanted him to know they could stand out there all night if they pleased. "You go back to the bedroom," he said quietly. Mary Beth didn't move. "I'm not—" "I said now." He didn't raise his voice, but something in it made her flinch. Not from fear of him, he knew that, but from knowing exactly what kind of man stood on the other side of that door and what kind of man she needed him to be in this moment. She set the spoon down and slipped past him, her skirts whispering across the rough pine floor. The sound of the back door's latch sliding into place told him she'd done more than just go to the bedroom. She'd made sure no one could circle a row, and without warning. The knock stopped. Silence spread through the cabin, stretching out like a rope between them and whoever stood outside. Sonny unhooked the rifle from the wall. Snow fell against the walls in soft handfuls. Somewhere in the distance, the wind cut through the trees with a long, low moan. But beneath it, there was still the faint creak of wood and the quiet draw of someone's breath, too slow to be from fear, too even to be from exertion, the breathing of a man who had all the time in the world. He thought about flinging the door open, shoving the muzzle into that steady breath, but something stopped him. These men, if it was the ones he suspected, wouldn't flinch, and he'd be giving them the fight they wanted on their terms. "Sonny," a voice finally came, low and flat, the kind that carried without needing to shout. "We just want to talk." Sonny kept still. If they were here for talk, they'd have sent a letter like decent folk. No one walked 2 miles through heavy snow for conversation. "You've been keeping something that ain't yours," the voice went on. A pause. "We can take it now, and this ends easy." From the back of the cabin, a floorboard creaked. He knew Mary Beth was listening. He also knew she was clutching the kitchen knife they kept under the breadboard. The voice outside let the silence settle before speaking again. "Or we can come back when the weather breaks. Your choice." That was the real threat. Not tonight. but the promise of a later visit when they could choose the hour and the numbers. Sonny shifted his grip on the rifle. He thought of the fire that had burned in the hearth for days without dying, the one he'd kept lit for her since the night she came to him barefoot in the snow. He thought of the frostbite in her fingers and the bruises along her ribs that told him more than she ever dared to say. He thought of the baby, their baby, in every way that mattered, sleeping in the cradle he'd built from spruce. And he knew no man who knocked like that would ever touch what was his. "Talk's over, son," Nee called back. For a moment the cold deepened. Then came the sound of boots turning in the snow, slow and deliberate. Each step was an insult, measured, unhurried, as if to say, "We're letting you breathe a little longer." When the sound faded, Sonny stayed by the door. He didn't trust silence, not until a crow cawed somewhere down the ridge and the wind filled the space they'd left behind. Only then did he set the rifle on the table and let out the breath he'd been holding. Mary Beth appeared in the doorway, pale but steady. "They'll be back," she said. "I know." He looked at the door. "But so will I." Not the kind a neighbor might give, not the kind of rhythm that said friend. The sound went through the wood and into his bones. Sonny set the poker back into the fire, slow, as if the extra seconds might buy him a better plan. Outside, the snow whispered under boots, several pairs, spreading out, deliberate. Mary Beth's breath hitched. She'd gone pale, hand resting near the rifle that leaned against the wall. Another knock, harder this time, made the hinges groan. "Evening, Sonny," a voice called. It was polite, but with that thin, cold edge men use when they've already decided how the night will end. Sonny stepped to the door, stopping just shy of the latch. "Evening," he said back, voice steady. "You know why we're here." "I reckon I do." The fire cracked, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Sonny glanced once at Mary Beth. She gave the smallest shake of her head, but he was already reaching for the rifle. The voice outside chuckled, low, humorless. "Ain't no fire that can burn forever, Sonny." He tightened his grip. "This one might,